Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we're looking into the disappearance of Robert James Wykel. And I'm going to give you a little short version of it and then we're going to read it. Then if you want to just listen to the short version, you can. It says that, and this is all allegedly, and this is just what I'm reading online, so... Robert James Wykel was born May 18, 1930, and he disappeared February 23, 1996 at the age of 65. It said he lived in Illinois before, and he had owned restaurants both in Illinois and New Mexico. He had gone west to work on the Alaska pipeline. His work had also taken him to foreign countries. He had an ex-wife and a daughter. She's full grown, and they still lived in Illinois or near Illinois. And him and his ex-wife had been talking about getting back together. He owned a diamond ring with a 1.25 carat diamond in a distinctive European cut, which he wore constantly, even when he was working on cars. He was a retired sheet metal worker from Burien, Washington, and he would buy classic cars. He would restore them, and would sell them. He had restored a 1989 Mercedes-Benz, which he liked so much that he ended up keeping it and driving it at his own. And he would go to the local McDonald's most mornings to have his coffee and sit and socialize with other retirees. I don't know if they do that where you live, but where I live at the local McDonald's, the older retirees, they like to go sit at McDonald's, both the men and the women, and they like to socialize. And the women will sit in one area and socialize, and the men in the other. Well, the one McDonald's we had, it has a new owner, and I think the new owner ran them off. So now they go to another McDonald's, and there's not as many of them. But I know I would often go and sit. And a lot of us local people that aren't older and retirees, even though I am older, will go and sit just to socialize with them as well. And we love to go to McDonald's in the morning to see them sitting there talking, and we might sit at our own tables with our family and just to listen to them and just to enjoy being around them. So since the one new owner of McDonald's kind of ran them off, they don't have like any business hardly at all. But then we go to another McDonald's in a nearby city, and there's a few of them, but not as many. So it's missing that warmth, and I don't know if it's the warmth and that family feeling of being around people. Anyway, so he also attended a weekly poker game. One of the other people who attended the weekly poker game with him was a neighbor named John Ogden. Wykel would often park his Mercedes in Ogden's driveway when he was going to be away for, overnight, or I don't know, it doesn't say the length of time, but when he was going to be away for a little while, that way his Mercedes would be safer. Myron Wynn, a younger, unemployed con man living off his girlfriend, started coming into McDonald's to sit and hang out with the older gentleman in the mornings, and he would tell his girlfriend that he was going to work when he did this. And he knew that Robert James Wykel collected classic cars and had long been wanting a 1950s Ford Thunderbird. So he told him that he knew of one that was for sale. And remember, this is all allegedly and what it says on the internet. And he conned him into giving him a $1,000 deposit for him. Sometime later, when Robert was upset with Myron for not closing the deal and not taking him to see the car or anything, Myron decided to get Robert James Wykel to get over $5,000 out of the bank, and he acted like he was taking him to purchase a car. So on February 20th, and that's when he disappeared when he was with him. On February 20th, the day before Robert James Wykel disappeared, he made 2 calls to a place called Mother Nature's Acres. It's a 130-acre RV park with its own woods and trails outside of Yelm in Thurston County, south of Tacoma. And Myron Wynn, the younger con man, his family owned and operated, it said. So, and like I said, this is just what it says. And they were together on February 23rd, I believe, and supposedly he disappeared on the 21st, because it says February 20th was the day before he disappeared. So they were together on February 23rd, I believe, at that RV park in the woods for some unknown reason. And that's about the time that Robert James Wykel disappeared. Wynn later gave a large diamond in a pendant to his girlfriend that he was living with, that and living off of, I guess, who did not think it was real because the diamond was so large. And yes, it was the same diamond that was from Robert's ring that he wore all the time. Myron told his girlfriend that he had found it in a parking lot, I believe on the ground. And it was the same parking lot that he told her he found it in, was the same parking lot that Myron, had left Robert Wykel's Mercedes in after he had been with Robert when Robert went missing. So I guess he was driving the Mercedes and left it there, and then told her he found the diamond on the ground in that same parking lot, where that was the same parking lot that they had found the Mercedes in. He left Robert's empty wallet in the Mercedes, and he tried to say that Robert had left the country and gone to Argentina with his wallet still in the car and his passport at home. At one point, he even claimed Robert had gone to California, but how's he going to go anywhere without his wallet? He was apparently not telling people the same story. Myron did not go to McDonald's to socialize over coffee after Robert disappeared and all that happened, not for some time. So he later sold that same diamond necklace for $2,000. So if Wynn did kill Robert James Wykel, his motive may have been money as well as the ring. And all in total, what it says, it's like $8,200. Because he got $2,000 for the diamond necklace, he got the $1,000 deposit from him, he got him to take out the $5,200. So it really seems like a man's life would be worth more than that, doesn't it? It seems like a person's life would be priceless. But anyway, it says the case was treated as a missing persons investigation for years. So, and you have some people who will kill somebody over, $20 or $10, or this person, I guess it was $8,200. And then you have other people who will save lives and who will put their lives first. And it blows me away that people are so different. But here we go. So Robert James Wykel, born May 18, 1930, disappeared February 23, 1996. He was a retired sheet metal worker from Burien, Washington, United States, who restored classic cars. He has not been seen by anyone who could possibly identify him since 1996, when he went to see a Ford Thunderbird he was interested in purchasing. Myron Wynn, who accompanied him at the time, was convicted 15 years later of murdering Wykel. Wynn maintains that he is innocent and that Wykel went to Argentina. The case was treated as a missing person investigation for years, despite early suspicion centering on Wynn, whom police named as a person of interest shortly afterwards. Prosecutors charged him with a crime in 2009. Although they had not found Wykel's body, they relied on his conflicting and evasive statements to police during the initial investigation, and a diamond Wynn gave his then-girlfriend shortly after Wykel's disappearance. Police believe the diamond belonged to Wykel, suggesting the robbery as his motive for the murder. After Wynn's first trial in 2010 ended in a hung jury, he was retried, convicted, and sentenced to 20 years. 20 years in prison. This man lost his life, and this guy gets 20 years in prison. The verdict was sustained on appeal. The case has been featured in an episode of Investigation Discovery series Disappeared. Wykel's body remains undiscovered. They've never found his remains. Wykel, a native of Illinois who had owned restaurants there and in New Mexico, had gone west to work on the Alaskan pipeline. His work had also taken him to foreign countries. In the early 1990s, he settled in Seattle suburb of Burien, where he had a successful career as a sheet metal worker and was able to take advantage of the area's abundant opportunities for outdoor recreation activities that he enjoyed. His former wife still lived in Illinois near their daughter and her family, but the two had been talking about reconciling and reuniting. After retiring, he supplemented his pension by buying classic cars at auto auctions, restoring them and reselling them for a profit. He restored a 1989 Mercedes-Benz, which he drove as his own. His other passion, it says his fine jewelry, showed in a ring with a 1.25-carat diamond in a distinctive European cut, which he wore constantly, even when working on cars. He often met with other retirees mornings to socialize over coffee at White Center McDonald's. In early 1996, the men were joined by Myron Wynn, a younger man who sometimes went by the name of Myron Haldridge or Michael Haldridge. He gravitated toward Wykel, seeking out opportunities to associate with him. At the time, Wynn was unemployed, supported by a girlfriend whom he lived with. Wynn told Wykel that he had learned that a soldier at Fort Lewis near Tacoma was offering a mid-1950s Ford Thunderbird for sale. Wykel, who had long been looking for one, gave Wynn $1,000 as a deposit on the eventual sale of the car. Bank records show that Wykel also withdrew $5,200 from his account in cash, the way he preferred to pay, to complete the transaction. Wynn put off Wykel repeatedly when the older man pressed him as to when he could get the car. Wykel, in turn, was growing increasingly frustrated with his putative middleman at a weekly poker game with friends and neighbors whom he excitedly told about the Thunderbird on previous occasions. Wykel said he was either going to get his money back from Wynn or the car. On February 21st, Wykel said he had finally made arrangements to pick up the car the next morning. Oh, I wonder if he'd already given him the $5,200 then. No one who knew Robert Wykel saw or heard from him after that. His initial absence was not unusual, as his trips to get cars sometimes took a few days. John Ogden, a younger neighbor who was part of the same weekly poker game, was a little surprised at first that Wykel had not come to his house to show off the car he had been waiting so long to get, as he often did. When Wykel did not attend the next poker game, Ogden became concerned. He noticed that Wykel's Mercedes was not in the driveway either. He called 911 to report Wykel missing, but was told that it was not against the law if Wykel had chosen to disappear. Meanwhile, in Illinois, Wykel's family there was also concerned. He was not returning any phone messages, something he usually did within a short time. Their messages on his answering machines showed their increasing worry. Ogden kept an eye on Wykel's house, noting that mail was piling up. He looked through it over the next couple weeks for clues that might explain Wykel's absence. On March 13th, he found a notice that Wykel's Mercedes, which had apparently been in a nearby park and ride lot, had been impounded. This news disturbed Ogden. The car's location was not unusual. He knew Wykel customarily took public transportation when he expected to buy a car so that he could return home in the new purchase. However, that lot was only 5 blocks from his house, so he usually walked to it. Even if he had driven, he would not have used the Mercedes. Indeed, Wykel would often park the Mercedes in Ogden's driveway when he left the area. Furthermore, Ogden read in the impound notice that the car had first been seen at the lot a few days earlier, while Wykel had been gone for 3 weeks. So he was gone for 3 weeks, and then the car was just parked there a few days before. He believes someone else familiar with Wykel's habits may have put the car there. When Ogden called the police with this information, they agreed to open a missing persons investigation. A detective with the King County Sheriff's Office who responded entered Wykel's house. In the kitchen, he found dishes in the sink and food rotting on the countertop, coffee in the pot, and an unfinished drink. Wykel's closets were full, and his luggage was in the house. Police concluded that Wykel had not expected to be gone long and intended to return. Well, obviously, because he didn't even take his luggage or clean up the house. Police opened the Mercedes and searched for clues. They found no fingerprints, but found Wykel's empty wallet. After Ogden informed Rebecca Lee, Wykel's daughter, that her father had been missing for 2 weeks and police were investigating, she came to the Seattle area to assist in the search. She informed the media, who ran stories about the case. Police were hoping that someone might come forward with information about a botched robbery or accident, but no leads developed. From his daughter, police learned of Wykel's background and theorized that he might have decided to travel abroad. He had taken his children to Argentina, a country he particularly liked, once when he worked there so they could experience another culture. He still had friends there and talked of returning someday. However, his passport was still in the house. The police found no records of travel plans, and his bank account showed no activity since he took the $5,200 out. The only other possibility was the Thunderbird Wykel had been ready to purchase with that money. Ogden recalled that Wykel had been losing his patience with the person who had said he could arrange the purchase, but never heard Wykel mention the man's name. Lee learned of her father's breakfast at McDonald's and went to visit the men herself. They too had noticed and been concerned about Wykel's disappearance. They told her the young man who had told Wykel about the car, and that they recalled as Mike had also not returned to eat with them since Wykel disappeared. They found his last name Wynn in his signature on a goodbye card the group had given the restaurant's manager who was about to leave the job. Before anyone else could find Mike Wynn, he called Lee at her hotel and told her he had gotten her number from her father's landlady. He said he had only recently returned from a trip out of town and learned about Wykel's disappearance. As far as he knew, he told her, Wykel had gone on an extended trip to an auto auction in California. Police found that unusual because Wykel had uncharacteristically not told his closest friends about such plans, yet Wynn knew. So he didn't tell anybody else, just Wynn, where he was going if he went to California. Eventually, detectives were able to talk to Wynn themselves. He told them he had not seen Wykel since breakfast on February 20th. At first, he claimed that the two had never discussed any cars Wykel was interested in purchasing. When police told him that the other men at the breakfast recalled that they had, he said that the deal they had made did not work out. Wynn became more interesting to police when they investigated his past. They found that he used several aliases and had been charged with drug trafficking and violence against women on several occasions. His girlfriend told them that he said he was going to work every day when he left the house, but she knew he never held a job. He was basically a con man, one detective later told disappeared. At Wykel's house, police found messages from Wynn amidst those from his friends and family on the answering machine. Wynn stood out because they did not show the increasing concern and worry that Wykel's friends expressed when days passed without return calls. One of Wynn's later messages even implied that Wykel had returned a message. One detective suggested that Wynn take a lie detector test, and he agreed. However, he never came when he said he would, and he didn't even ask to delay the test. Police found that he was lying about why. In one instance, he claimed to have a dental appointment, but a detective who watched the dentist's office in question never saw Wynn enter. Later, the dentist said Wynn wasn't even a patient. They became convinced that he was a pathological liar. A review of Wykel's phone records led to the first break in the case. On February 20th, the day before he disappeared, Wykel had made 2 calls to Mother Nature's Acres, a 130-acre RV park with its own woods and trails outside Yelm in Thurston County, south of Tacoma. Wynn's family, Myron Wynn's family, owned and operated that. The King County detectives went there and talked to the employees. One of them, Wynn's sister Robin, recalled that he had come down on February 23rd. I wonder if they stayed in an RV there or something. He was with a man who matched Wykel's description and drove a black Mercedes similar to Wykel's. They claimed they were just killing some time while they were waiting for a car the other man was trying to purchase became available. Robin recalled that the man who appeared to be Wykel made a telephone call and seemed increasingly impatient. So, other employees at the RV park corroborated Robin's account. If it was Wykel, it was the last time he had been seen. Detectives now believe that they had proof that Wynn had lied to them again when he claimed he and Wykel had never seriously pursued the purchase of the Thunderbird, and when he claimed to have last seen Wykel 3 days earlier. So here they are in this place with all 130 acres, woods and an RV park, and that's the last time anybody ever sees him. So to me, that would be, if he killed him, that would be the first place I'd go looking for a body and have cadaver dogs all over that place. Anyway, back to the story. Robin's account also linked him to Wykel's Mercedes during the time it was unaccounted for. They looked forward to talking to Wynn again and asked him to explain these latest discrepancies in his account. When he was arrested on an outstanding warrant for a traffic violation on April 11th, they thought they had their chance. Instead, Wynn invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and he refused to tell them anything more until he spoke to a lawyer. After he was released, he left the Seattle area. Detectives had come to believe Wykel had met with foul play and designated Wynn a person of interest in the case. Since they had no new leads, the case soon grew cold. The diamond. For the next 3 years, the detectives worked mostly on their other cases, but never quite left the Wykel case behind, staying in touch with the family infrequently. Lee said later she felt they had given up on her father. In 1999, one detective, John Holland, took over the case and took a more aggressive approach, putting up flyers in the area that made clear the police thought Wykel had come to harm. He and Susan Peters, a detective who had been part of the original investigation and had kept in touch with Lee, decided to go talk to Robin Wynn again. She told them two things that interest them. First, she said she had seen her brother within the last 2 years at a family reunion in Texas. This was the first time the King County authorities knew his whereabouts since his original departure. I guess that's because he didn't keep a job and he lived off his girlfriend. Secondly, he had been showing off a large diamond set in a pendant, something that seemed unusual to her since he was so often unemployed and could not likely afford such a stone. Peters and Holland wondered if this could be Wykel's diamond. In 2000, they interviewed the woman Wynn had been living with 4 years earlier, but no longer was in a relationship with. And she said that in late February of 1996, shortly after Wykel disappeared, Wynn gave her a diamond pendant as a birthday gift. It was not in a box such as a jeweler might use to package it. She suspected it was not real due to its large size and had no idea where it might have come from. He told her he had found it in the Burien park and ride lot, coincidentally the same place Wykel's abandoned Mercedes had been parked. However, he had taken it back from her when the relationship ended and she made him leave her house. Robin later told them that her brother sold the diamond pendant to an aunt for $2,000. She helped the King County detectives contact the aunt. At first, the aunt said that he had offered it to her for $1,500, claiming he had to have bought it from a coworker for $1,000 more. A jeweler she took it to appraised it at $3,000 to $5,000. She claimed at first to still have not bought it and merely let Wynn live with her, but then admitted she had eventually bought it from Wynn for $2,000. She still had it, and they persuaded her to give it to them for examination. A gemologist who examined it told them that indeed it was an unusual European cut. It had the unusual European cut it had been described as having by Rebecca Lee. He also found many nicks and scrapes on it, consistent with doing metalwork while wearing a ring. Later, Rebecca went to another jeweler who specialized in recreating lost pieces from detailed descriptions given to him. He made a drawing based on her description of her father's ring. It matched the stone the police got from Wynn's aunt, and thus from Wynn himself, almost exactly. Even the stone's diameter was the same. Holland and Peters called Wynn in Texas and asked about his sister's account that he and Wykel had been seen together 2 days after Wynn claimed to have last seen the older man. He admitted to going to Thurston County with Wykel, where he said they tried to call the seller. Afterwards, Wynn said they drove back to Burien, but he could not remember where Wykel had dropped him off. The detectives bluffed and told them that they had security camera footage showing the car going into the park and ride. The next interview took place in Texas. This time they told him about the diamond. He confirmed that he found it in the Burien Park and Ride, the same lot where Wykel's Mercedes had been abandoned. This answer again interested the detectives, as Wynne had never suggested he had even been there before. When bluffed again and told them that they found Wykel's DNA on the diamond, Wynne changed his story again, explaining that he had shown it to Wykel immediately after finding it, another detail that he had not shared during the initial investigation. The detectives felt they had enough circumstantial evidence to charge Wynne with Wykel's murder. They still did not have a body, and prosecutors were uncertain if they could convict Wynne without finding Wykel's body. They decided to try and find the body, searching a number of places in or around Thurston County where Wynne could have disposed of a body, which I would think would be at the RV park, anyway, with all those woods, 130 acres of woods. They were unsuccessful. In the meantime, Wykel's family had him declared legally dead in 2003, 7 years after he had been last seen. The case again stalled, but Holland and Peters kept working on it when they could. Without Wykel's body, they knew that prosecutors would have to show a strong motive and detailed sequence of events. They continued to travel to Texas and talk to Wynne whenever they uncovered something. Each time another contradiction in his account was pointed out to him, Wynne changed his story again. Peters said they wrote every single lie down, and they have pages of inconsistencies. On one of those visits, they asked again if he would take a lie detector test. He told them that his attorney had advised him not to. When the detectives asked him for the name of his attorney, he asked, "Does it matter?" The break that finally gave the detectives the evidence they needed to arrest Wynne came from Texas. A friend of Wynne, with whom he had apparently discussed the case, told them Wynne said that nothing's going to happen. They're not even looking in the right ballpark for the body, suggesting to Holland and Peters that not only did Wynne know there was a body, but where it was. In 2009, authorities in Texas arrested Wynne and extradited him to Washington to stand trial on a charge of first-degree murder. Without Wykel's body, prosecutors knew they would have to present a lot more evidence than they might otherwise to support their case that Wynne killed Wykel. They theorized that Wynne had overheard Wykel talking about cars and seen him showing his cash at McDonald's one morning and decided he would make a good mark for another confidence scheme. To support this theory, they put on 4 witnesses who previously had been Wynne's victims in similar schemes. In those cases, Wynne asked a portion of the price for something greatly desired by them and claimed he was able to help them purchase, but never completed the deals. The lengthy record of his prevarications and evasions to the police supported this claim about his duplicitous tendencies and linked him to the crime. Wykel, however, was the first such mark to begin to realize that he was being defrauded. To avoid returning the $1,000, prosecutors claim Wynne played for time by taking Wykel down to Thurston County on the pretext of meeting the seller. Once there, he lured Wykel to an isolated location alone where he either inadvertently killed Wykel during a confrontation over the money or deliberately killed him with the added bonus of the cash Wykel had on him and his diamond ring. See, and I really think it would be at the RV park, maybe either in an RV that he knew was there that was alone and desolated, or just somewhere on the 130 acreage that he knew he could probably do it and nobody would notice. Under this theory, Wynne's overriding purpose was robbery, a predicate felony justifying the most serious murder charge available under Washington law. The prosecutors dropped the initial charge of premeditation as well. Wynne went on trial mid-2010. He continued to profess his innocence. In addition to the missing body and the lack of any evidence suggesting Wykel was dead, Wynne argued that the police had not adequately explored the possibility they originally entertained that the older man might have suddenly decided to visit Argentina with no wallet and no passport. The court declared a mistrial when the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. A few months later, in 2011, a new jury was impaneled and Wynn was tried again. During the trial, there were allegations of jury misconduct. One alternate jury had kept bumping into both prosecutors and defense attorneys and had at one point been caught looking at state evidence in the elevator. Two others, the bailiff said, had begun deliberating before the case was submitted. The Superior Court Judge Susan Craighead dismissed them both and seated two alternates, one of whom was a jury allegedly to have attempted to look at the prosecution evidence. The jury convicted Wynn in April after a day's deliberations. After the verdict, his lawyers asked for a post-trial hearing on whether the jury misconduct had been prejudicial to the outcome. Craighead ruled that it had not been. At sentencing, Wynn continued to insist he was innocent. "I'm not going to beg forgiveness for something I did not do," he told Craighead. She sentenced him to 20 years, the minimum for first-degree murder in Washington. So he got the minimum sentence. As of 2016, he is serving his time at Clallam Bay Correction Center. Wynn appealed his conviction to the Washington Court of Appeals. He did not challenge the murder conviction itself. Instead, he claimed that there had been insufficient evidence to suggest the robbery was related to the murder, therefore negating the first-degree murder charge. He argued that the murder was not necessary for him to steal the money since that had happened well in advance, nor was it related to the theft of the ring, since under the state's case he had not demonstrated any interest to steal the ring prior to the murder. At most, he argued, the state had proved that he had taken the ring as an afterthought to the murder. He also challenged the jury instruction: the taking constitutes robbery even if death precedes the taking, whenever the taking and the homicide are part of the same transaction, that he said reflected the same misunderstanding. In addition, he raised two procedural issues. First, Judge Craighead had ruled incorrectly at the post-trial hearing on the jury misconduct. Second, his lawyers at the trial should have allowed him to take the stand in his own defense, which he claimed they argued about regularly. In June 2013, a panel of 3 judges unanimously upheld Wynn's conviction. Judge Mary K. Becker wrote for herself, Linda Lau, and Anna Schindler that a jury could have reasonably concluded from the evidence presented, interpreted in the light most favorable to the state, that Wynn killed Wykel at least in part to keep the money he had already obtained fraudulently. As for the ring and any cash Wykel had, the jury had had the option to convict him merely on theft, since taking property from a deceased person is not by itself robbery. But the jury had found Wynn committed robbery by virtue of its conviction on the first-degree felony charge. If it did so on the basis of Wynn's actions after killing Wykel, Becker wrote, it could have taken note that he had no legitimate regular employment at the time. It would have been perfectly reasonable for the jury to have concluded that Wynn needed money and killed Wykel for the cash and the diamond ring, and that taking these items after Wykel's death constituted robbery. So, nothing in the record, Becker said, suggested to the panel that there was any abuse of discretion by Craighead in her handling of the jury misconduct issue, nor did Wynn offer any new insight of evidence that would have afforded an opportunity for further review. As for Wynn's desire to testify on his own behalf, his briefs did not elaborate on what he might have said or how his testimony could have changed the outcome, nor did he suggest that his attorney's refusal to do so constituted either ineffective assistance of counsel or misconduct. So that's a lot. And then you have the Charlie Project, and the Charlie Project gives a description so that if you're going through and looking at the John Does, trying to figure out if they've already found him, he's 5'11", 205 to 225 pounds, age 65. I don't know if it... blonde brown hair, so blondish brown hair and brown eyes, and he had a mustache and a receding hairline. And it also says that his nickname was Bob. So And then this one you can read, it's a lot shorter, but it says that Wykel is described as a friendly, generous person who did not hesitate to strike up conversations with strangers. His family stated that he looked and acted younger than his age in 1996 and would have fought back if he was attacked or robbed. So, and that is that. So you can go look for this and read this as well. And there's some pictures of the guy. It really seems like somebody's life would be worth more than $8,200 or however much that other man got. And it's so sad. And anyway, don't forget to pray for his family and his loved ones. Oh, and I'm not sure when it says that they were trying to reconcile or spend time together, if the two had been talking about reconciling and reunited, if it meant his wife or he just meant that he was going to be spending time with his daughter again. So I thought I would mention that. I believe it's his wife because there's a comma here. Because there's a comma here separating, the comma would separate that part of the sentence, so it would be his wife talking about reconciling. So that's what I believe that it was insinuating. But anyway, don't forget to stop and pray for his family and his loved ones and his friends and everyone that missed him, and that, you know, such a terrible loss. And thank you so much for tuning in. Please feel free to leave comments, and have a great day. Bye-bye.